have the bread and butter projects going on, but then you have one that you really enjoy, kind of what Shelby's book was all about. You really enjoy, give it all you got. So you kind of cover both bases, if you will, if you want to think about it that way. So that's a portfolio approach to sort of managing this tension between, getting ahead with promotions and so forth, and also being able to do some original, indigenous, organic work, if you will. So that's point number one. The second one is a tougher question. How do you develop skills in building theory? The best way I know how you develop skills in building theory is by working with someone who is somewhat better than you at it. Nobody's perfect. The whole process is a very, very it's a process that's very hard to put some structure on it. I have been trying to do that for the last 15 years or so, and I think I have something to offer, and I'll be more than glad to share that with you. I've been conducting workshops at various schools that may be helpful. In fact, there's one coming up, Lisa is in charge. It's coming up in July. If you have this is not a publicity thing, but I just want to let you know that there is some effort being made. But secondly, there are some very nice papers that you can read on constructing theory that might be able to provide you with some inspiration and some guidance. So in particular, you got to read Shelby's book. That's really important, as I mentioned this afternoon earlier. But there are some very nice papers, especially in the management discipline. Read Debbie's paper that was cited by Manjeet was talking about that. It's a very nice paper. But there are some articles that have appeared, some of which were cited today, like the 1989 issue of Academy of Management Review is dedicated to theory construction. That'll be helpful. There's ASQ, Sutton and Staw and Carl Weick. Carl Weick is a very fine person, and he's written on theory construction as well, so that would be good. So there are some avenues. I'll be happy to chat more with you, but I'm interested too.
One of the things that I think can be an initial building block, certainly not the full thing. I think Ajay is going to be much better with whatever information. But I think one is just kind of contrarian thinking. What I see too often is people, well, man, it managed to get published in one of the top journals. It's really got to be good. Not always. It's good within a certain domain, but there were maybe implicit boundary conditions that weren't made explicit. And so I think be a critical consumer of the literature you read, not just sort of keeping score. Okay, what effects did they get? What variables did they study? But be a critical consumer. When I go and I look at an article, if I'm going to do a little write-up, I put what they labeled it, and then I put behind it what they really studied, in my opinion. And a lot of times it's not the same thing. For example, I think it's a different construct based on, in survey research, how they measured it, or in experimental research, how they manipulated it. So I think partly it's one of the big foundations for many people, there's certainly other approaches, is just becoming a more critical consumer of what you're reading out there in the research literature and thinking for yourself, not just accepting what you've been given or what's gotten published.
Just a question. After all the presentation in defense of theory, I'd like your reaction to potential dangers of theory or the way it's used by some doctoral students. And what I'm referring to actually is pretty precise, is in countries in Africa where doctoral education is not well developed, what a typical doctoral student will do is look for theory because it has to look scientific. So choose constructs, select relationships and measurements, and apply that on the field. And there's a total lack of creativity. It joins what you were saying, Peter, before. And oftentimes those theories are applied in contexts where they shouldn't be applied. I'm going to study, I don't know, brand passion and brand love on a population of people earning less than $2 a day, which doesn't mean a thing. So, and that's the danger of that thought that you have have to refer to a theory. You have to refer to an established construct, established measurement, established relationship, and then you do science. And was wondering whether it wouldn't be better to have no theory at all, or no knowledge at all, as you were saying, Peter, and saying, let's go see and how a consumer earning less than $2 a day just behaves. So, reaction.
Theories drive theories drive everything. Every time someone makes a decision at the federal level about what they're going to do with the economy, what they're going to do with taxes, what they're going to do in any kind of area, they have a theory about how the way the world works and what they're going to do. If you're interested in having an impact on our society and whether our society grows or does not grow, whether it has a good economy or a bad economy, whether people are poor or whether they are comfortable. Theories drive all of that. So theory is important. And if I could make my own plea, I think that what has happened is that we've let neoclassical economics drive the theory behind that's driving the decisions in Washington and elsewhere about what kind of public policy we ought to have. And I think neoclassical economics is simply not all that terribly good at describing real-world economies and how they operate. So when you work in the area of theory, theories drive everything. Everything you do in the classroom, there's a theory behind it. You're saying, this is what's going to be effective. This will work. This will, say, encourage my students to learn. This will encourage my students to read more. This will encourage my students to be more critical. This will encourage them then. What are you doing? You have some implicit theory about student behavior, and you're applying that theory. Theories drive everything.
If I could comment on that specific example that you cited, what's the relevance of brand love or brand passion to a consumer in Africa making $2 a year? Wouldn't it be better to just forget about that, construct, that theory, and just, find out how that person earning $2 a day, month, reacts to branded situations, whatever. I think you're absolutely right. Notice over here, you are rightly rejecting the blind application of that construct of brand passion, brand love, whatever. And that is absolutely correct. And implicit in what you said is you're advocating the generation of a new construct or a new theory that is relevant for that consumer. That is exactly the kind of work we ought to be doing. That is theory construction. And so that's not the danger of theory that you describe. What you describe is the danger of blind application of theory to a context that's not ecologically valid with the construct that you're speaking of.
I guess I'll speak up here. I think there is a danger of a tyranny of theory. Although I don't wish to come across like theory is bad, or I'm not supportive of this undertaking today, which I think is terrific. But I mentioned during my talk, consumer behavior is training its people to, the contribution to theory is what they're about. And the notion of scholarship in the Journal of Marketing also, to some extent, has that same, a lot of the reviewers have that same orientation. So I want to just give you a quick report of a paper we did. It was on the illegal diversion of firearms in the United States, which is an area that's a serious, big problem. People killed, a lot of money spent, a lot of pain and agony. And you can't get data on, we couldn't do an experiment or a survey. Companies wouldn't cooperate. What we did was participate in a law case that was a suit against the entire firearms industry by the NAACP. And Greg Gundlach was my colleague, who is also a lawyer, and he was serving as an expert witness in the case. His area is channels of distribution. And he was studying how guns get sold by legitimate marketers into elements who are not allowed by law to own guns, that is, criminals, but there are categories of people. And can those channels of distribution be protected or not? Could we have better public policies regarding channels of distribution protections? The paper, therefore, we got data under subpoena, or under oath, in depositions, interrogatories, and documents, to understand what the gun industry is doing in terms of protecting its channels. And in a very brief phrase, they're not doing very much, very little actually. And however, there are big differences across the firms. So it's really not appropriate to talk about the industry in this case. Some firms, one firm, 55% of the guns it sold in 1996 had been recovered and traced through crimes 4 years later, which is a shocking statistic. Other firms have less than 1%. So there's a huge range in there. So we had a statistical analysis of these issues called safeguarding, and we found a statistically significant connection between safeguarding and guns and crime. We sent this into the Journal of Marketing, and it was an amazing experience. We had 3 rounds of reviews. We ended up with 7 reviewers, some of whom never turned anything in, but we were up to reviewer number 7. Someone got added somewhere in the process, and he or she was trying to help us. And so I think they liked the idea of the paper, and they wanted to see it succeed. So they provided us the advice that what we should do is actually contribute to theory here, rather than document. I think we're being consistent with Peter's suggestions earlier. We had some very interesting findings about a major problem in the United States. That's not what the Journal of Marketing is supposed to do, according to this reviewer. What we should be doing is contributing to marketing theory. And so we had some pieces about demarketing and counter-marketing in there. We were talking about that. And they said, now that's really interesting. So why don't you reconfigure the paper, add more on demarketing and counter-marketing in terms of theory, and just use the firearm stuff as a illustration. Now, I wouldn't say that would be a bad paper if someone did that, but that isn't what we were doing.